Carthage must be destroyed. Today, I'm going to start a new video series. It's going to be a series of, I'm going to call them newbie tutorials. And what I want to do here is basically show everyone the life cycle of a miniature. Sounds like I'm talking about the Nature Channel when I talk like that. But what I want to do here is I want to start from the sprue up, put together a plastic model, and go through all the steps I do to build one model and fully paint it up. So I'm going to start from on the sprue to final varnished result and just show everyone all the tools, all the steps, and all the systems involved in building models. Now this is going to be more of a, I think, aimed towards newbies. Of course, a lot of my channel followers are already avid hobbyists and gamers, so a lot of people already know the stuff I'm talking about. But in case you are new, or maybe you just want to see how I paint my guys, I am going to start my process from the very beginning here, all the way right up to the final painted version. And I'm just going to make that the theme of my, like I said, my next series here. So I'm going to try and stabilize my camera a bit more here today so the shakiness is less. Plus I have to use both hands to use tools. So yeah, let's get right into it. When you get a box of miniatures, you're going to pop it open. You're going to get the sprues, right? Very basic. If you've done modeling before, you're going to see them. And the sprues got all the parts you need to build the models. These here are the Peri, I got some dog hair on there. These are the Peri Afghan tribesmen I've been working on, if you've been watching my channel. This is a fresh sprue here. And most box sets, when you open them, they're going to have some form of instruction in there and some sort of, just building, what do you want to call it? Building instructions, I guess, a manual on how to put minis together. After you put minis together for a while, you don't obviously really need a manual. A lot of it is just kind of common sense. It might be a little harder on some tanks and things, but yeah, they're pretty straightforward. You got a bunch of parts on a sprue that you're going to take off and put together. So the first thing that I do when I build miniatures is you want to get these pieces of the sprue off of there. And this is where this, I'm going to show you the right side up here because they kind of have an up backwards. One side's upside down, the other side's not. But these are fine detail cutters. These are just, I'm going to call them model clippers from Games Workshop, from Citadel. And they're just a tool that you use to clip off the models from the sprue. It's going to look something like this. Mine's a little aged, so you can see you got some damage in there. It's not as springy as it used to be. Citadels are a little pricey right now. I believe there are some alternatives if you look at some other companies. I think Army Painter has something, or Green Stuff World. But yeah, what you do, you just pick it to, you just look at the model and, say you want to do this guy's body. See if I can do it on the camera here. Oh yeah, look at that. Just want to do it without actually snapping that model. Oh. I don't know how much I'll actually film of this, but yeah, you just clip off the sprues. Easy peasy. And I'm not going to build all these guys on camera. I'm just going to do one model for the series. It's going to be my top to bottom model. And then yeah, you just take off the parts that you want to use after you eye the sprue. And undo up that body there. What do I want to make this guy? So you want to check too what the sprue's got. He's got a sword. And I'm going to make him a rifleman, I think. So I picked off the... what I've done is I picked off the model sprues, or rather I pick up the pieces of the sprue that I want to use for my model. And when you start chopping them off, you're going to notice you're going to have some various, residue or remains from the sprue itself sticking on the base there. Unless you remove that, he's not going to be straight. I have a Warlords game base here, and a lot of bases won't have this issue, but Warlords have their World War II guys. I'm going to try and keep this central to the camera here. They have them on sprues, so I'm going to have to remove these little, connector pieces here. And that's useful if you have the big pieces. I just kind of try and carefully get that off, trim off the excess pieces there. And you don't want to trim it to damage the part you're actually going to be painting. Or some sprues have this little protection piece on the end of their rifles and weapons and stuff. Let's just chip that off without, there we go. So you're gonna get a bit of cleanup doing there and going there, but yeah, that's the first tool you want to use. The second tool that I like to employ, and I think everyone should, is put it the right side up here. it's their mold line remover, and this is kind of like a dull knife, if you will, and it looks something like this here, and you've got it's not sharp or anything, but it's shaped in a way that you get edges. I think of it like an unsharpened blade, and what it is sharp enough for when you put it at the angle is to remove mold lines. Now, mold lines are a result of molding, right? The model's been molded, the model's been produced in let's just say a factory setting or wherever it's made, a mold, and this is for any model, plastic or metal, and you can see right on the edges here of this model, usually where the models are halfway cut, you have these mold lines here. And mold lines, I mean, you don't have to remove them. You could just get straight into painting if you wanted to. But I personally think that looks unrealistic. I don't walk around outside with a mold line on the side of my clothes or my body. So I remove them, and you kind of go at it at an angle here, and you want to scrape off and smooth those mold lines. So you see, it takes a bit of, I always go a couple pass-bys with it, but when you start gently going up and down the model, those mold lines are gone. You can still see some here in the guy's sash, and if we slowly, and not too hard, because you don't want to destroy the details in the model, a little bit of scratching or rubbing on the sash isn't going to do much to it, because when paint goes on it, it'll add another layer. But you want to try and use that to get the mold lines out. Okay. Now you also see that while I can remove the mold line on the top of the sash, you can't really get into the crevices. There's also this big whopping piece here. You know, you can look here. It doesn't look very straight here. It's a big whopping piece from cutting it out from the sprue. So the other tool that I make use of are files. And files here, I have a bunch of different shaped ones. You should have a round file and a square file, and I think there's a triangular one too. I don't know their proper names, but you want to get some files, and they're fairly inexpensive. And then I want to get into those grooves here with the skinniest point. This might not be the best one because it's not so skinny. Maybe this one here. This one's more of a bit of a square shape. But then I like to get into the grooves there and try and get as much of that mold line out as possible. You can always use the flathead here too to try and scratch out some of that, and I might use a different one for that. But yeah, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to keep removing the mold lines, and I'll show you the other side here. There's also, you know, there's mold lines on every piece here. You can see him on his leg there, you can see it along the side of his body there. But yeah, if you try to remove all of that excess plastic, it'll make the model a lot more clean and a lot more easy to paint. You should also file off, you know, from the bottom piece here. There's some of that extra, those extra pieces from the sprue, and that stuff you just kind of apply pressure, and you want to take that off. So yeah, and that's on every model piece, right? It's even on the sprue here, but you can see on this head here. Oh, where'd he go? Ooh. Okay, you can see on the head here that, I mean, he's got mold lines too. We can see up close. You can see on his turban there, and then on the top of his head, right along here, you get a mold line as well. So yeah, it takes some time if you want to make the model look really good to remove all this excess stuff that wouldn't naturally be there. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to film it all, but this is just the process that I do to take it off. So use some files and a mold line remover and try and get all that excess mold line and residue off. And I just want to point it out here too, as I'm doing this off camera, is that there's also mold lines inside hard to reach areas. I don't use much of the mold line remover for that. I use the file. You can see all this file's got all this this flaky plastic on it, but I file like inside areas here that you can't easily reach, and that helps a lot as well. Again, I have actually filed this, but there's going to be an arm covering this, so I don't get too crazy on that arm piece. I just make it flat enough so it's not going to be sticking out when I glue something on it. Okay, so I've taken a file to all the models, and you can see that the mold lines are smoothed out there. You're going to have a bit of scratching, and a bit of abrasion mark. But what I end up doing in the end is I do wash these minis after I glue them together, and I'll show you that in another video. After I wash them, see a little bit of the line still there. After I wash them and you get primer on them, any little residue or anything like that is gonna not be a problem. So now, and I'll just show you guys through here. I did all the guns here. Now what we're gonna do is we're going to, okay, here's an example that I wanted to talk about. You're gonna find some residue and stuff on your mini as you do all these steps. If you have a bit of water in this process and you don't want that residue there, you can just like brush some on with a brush or just dab some on, and that residue will go away. And then you let, blow dry it. Just blow, I say blow dry, but air dry it with your mouth, just blow on it and it should be fine to keep going. I got some on his hand there. But that's not so bad once you wash them or you just dab it in water, that'll all come off. And you'll want to do that to clean your miniature. So I'm gonna glue these guys now together. And what I like to do in the beginning is I like to do the main body part first, and I like to glue it central to whatever base I'm using here. Let's see if I can get a better focus. For plastics, I'm going to be using the Citadel's plastic glue here. This glue here is really good. It's a bit pricey, but it's good for holding the plastics together. It melts the pieces together and molds them in a way that just gives them a sturdy, strong bond between each piece here. You can also use super glue, but I find that super glue on plastics isn't the greatest in my experience, just because it doesn't bond them the same as plastic glue would. If you're doing metal models, you'll definitely have to use super glue, or if you're using resin models. But for plastics, we're just going to use the Citadel plastic glue. Okay, so I always have this problem with Citadel, and just to speed things up here, I'm going to do what you shouldn't do and take the nozzle out and use the bigger area to glue this on. This is not a good idea. If you can unjam that, you should do it, because this can get really messy. A lot more glue comes out. So you have to be really careful if you're not using that nozzle. But normally what I do is I poke and prod that clogged up nozzle until it starts streaming out again. But I found that Citadel's, despite their price, is one of the worst for clogging up and not having a good time. So I glue that one on there. I'm gonna let it, it's just gonna sit on the center there, try and get center of the base. And I'm gonna try and unclog that nozzle now. And yeah, this basically is just going to sit, and I'm gonna let it dry a bit before I start gluing on the rest of the pieces. I usually let it dry for about 5 minutes or so, 5 to 10 minutes or so before I go on to gluing the next piece. Well, I haven't been able to unjam it, and I don't want to waste too much time, so I'm going to keep doing it the way I was doing. I don't recommend it, but that's fine for me because I'm used to it. You'll notice there's still some residue on the beard here. If you get to a point and you've glued stuff on and you notice there's still residue or a mold line, don't worry. Just let all the glue cure for about, I even say up to 12 to 24 hours. And then after that, come back to the model and then remove mold lines so you don't pop anything off when it's half dry in here, right? So I just like to, after I glue all this together, and probably in time for tomorrow's tutorial, I will, or whenever I do the next tutorial, I will have that removed and cleaned off. So in case you missed a mold line or still have residue on it, don't worry when you start gluing. You can come back after and get more of that off. So I'm going to just glue the arms on here and continue. So I've glued this guy's arm on here, these arms rather. You can see I got a little excess glue because I'm not using the nozzle proper, but don't worry, that'll be covered up when we prime it. One thing with some minis, you're going to find that they have these separate arms where you have to connect a hand or something, and this happens to rifles and two-handed weapons. You're going to have to connect a hand to the other part of an arm or something like this. When it's still, this isn't fully dried here yet, so it's still easy enough to kind of move around, but you want to be able to work with that before it starts to cure and hold, because then you'll be able to get the right shape and the right angle you want here. You're going to see that sometimes as you glue guys together, you're going to get a little gap between the model's maybe body or the head or something. Like here in between his arm, he's got a bit of a gap going here. What I try and do is I try to make sure that I align them as closely possible, or as close as possible as I can. I might have to do it up close here off camera just to get it. But if there is a gap, don't worry, there are steps to deal with the gaps as well that we'll look at as we go along here. So I'm just going to adjust this guy's arm in a way I like it, and then keep filming. And just to show you guys what I'm talking about, you see you get kind of a gap on, I'll use my file to point it out, you get this gap here on this arm section, even though it's been glued on. Now that's a result of two things. You can see this side here was fairly flat when I started, and it glued in nicely, like the glue is already connecting and it kind of melted in really well, melted it in really well, and it's just gonna work out fine. Whereas this other arm here, it's actually not straight on both the arm inside and the body. So it's going to be a little bit, I would have to say, it's gonna pop out a bit just because it also has to connect to a hand here. And this hand here is going to, and connecting there, is gonna have it pop out. Like I said, don't worry, we have green stuff and milliput and stuff to work with that and fix that. So I think I'm happy with how this guy's going to turn out. And you can still see here, I missed some of the residue stuff. Like I said, don't worry. For now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna let this guy sit and dry. I do actually want to add a tail to his turban. I don't know if I'm gonna add it to the front or back yet. But at this point, if I wanted to, I would add extra weapons, like if I wanted to add a buckler or a sword, a second sword arm. I don't think I will for him because he's got a dagger here. This is where I'd add a little accessories after I got the main body based on the base. Like this guy on his own could be the miniature right now, but anything extra I like to add at the end here. So I think I'm gonna stop it here for now because that's basically all of my steps I do up to assembling the guy. When we get to the next video, you will see the extras on him, and he'll be fully dry by that time. So we can go into the next step where I do some final cleaning and then I wash him up. So thank you all for watching. I'm going to continue this series until this guy's fully painted, just to put you through all the steps that I do when I am painting models. And thank you all for watching. We will see you on the next one.